This is Nothing But That Sports Talk. And welcome to Nothing But That Sports Talk. I'm Rafique Louison alongside Jeff Eisenband. Welcome back to the show once again. And let's address the elephant in the room here before we get to any sports related stuff. Joe Biden is our president of the United States of America. What are your impressions about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I try for the sake of a lot of my job to stay off publicly politics, but I think this is something that affects sports just because you see, despite the stick to sports talk from the president, a lot of people, obviously sports have come into things, even the Big Ten, right? The president made such a push to get the Big Ten football back, a lot of those states being battlegrounds. It definitely affects the sports world. And I think it'll just, you'll see a little bit more, I don't know if I want to say freedom of speech, but freedom of expression from a lot of people in the sports world now. Not that they weren't doing it before, but just, I think, a little bit more of acceptance, as we change administrations.
Yeah. And if you saw last season with the NBA and WNBA, a lot of it's been focused on social justice. So it's kind of tough to focus on being a sports fan when the athletes care a lot about what's going on outside the world between all the murders and stuff. And now the sports athletes are buying into the new presidency of George Biden, getting rid of Donald Trump. And I feel that this is going to be a major change in America for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, you saw Draymond Green, right, tweeting at LeBron, now you guys can go to the White House. So there's clearly that sentiment in the sports world right now.
Yeah, but now that we've pretty much talked enough about Joe Biden, since this is a sports podcast and I'm going to actually keep it that way, why don't we address another elephant in the room, as this week will be the release of NBA 2K21, well, the next gen version.
Yeah, the re-release.
As the game is being developed, how excited are you with this compared to the current gen?
I mean, I think you're always excited, right? I'm 27, so I'm old enough now to be in that sort of, I've lived through multiple consoles, and you get excited when it's something different. You see the graphics, and my friends are always quick to point out, like, look, those are freeze frames. Those aren't the actual playing, but I think you're just going to see a much, video games every year. It just feels more realistic. And I think we'll see an extra jump in these next generation consoles. They're built with different technology. And I think that that's what people are going to get excited about. Sports games, because they come out every year, they're not there are some combat games that might come out every 3 to 5 years. And it's a big difference every time they come out. Sports games, it's more of a slow and steady difference each year. But I think that, next gen you'll see just a little bit more progress than you're used to, both in the visual aspects of the game and probably in the fluidity of actually playing the game, the gameplay itself.
Yeah, but what modes are you most excited to play when the game is out? Well, next gen style.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as in a deep, obviously I cover the NBA 2K League, but I wouldn't say I'm grinding the game for 6 hours a night. I'm kind of past my prime there. So, I love playing straight play now with my friends, or, quick play in NBA 2K, but I want to get more into park mode, just because I think that's the mode that's blowing up right now in NBA 2K. I think it's because you have that expression of you're playing basketball, but it's a little bit more expressive. You can change up your outfit. It's a little more arcade style. There's some, it's not quite fully NBA Jam, guys flying through the air, but it's that street ball mixed with a little bit of traditional basketball in there and a lot of 3-on-3.
Yeah. And then when I saw the trailer for the city, it's just so much hoops going on in the Black Lives Matter court and the basketball court paying over to the late Kobe Bryant, and the court where you're playing at those basic courts, all and work your way towards playing at those 4 affiliations. Like, not to mention the fact that you're still going to get to keep the same consistent tradition of play towards the NBA 2K League.
It reminds me a lot of the GTA 4 map. If people want to go back to, it was New York City with, this has 4 boroughs is what they're calling them. And it almost feels like that without the violence, basketball instead of violence from Grand Theft Auto, that, you're able to travel this widespread map. And it's just really cool. I think that's what's made NBA 2K so successful, is that, creating almost a story mode and an online gameplay that's not just straight playing basketball, but actually a lifestyle.
Yeah, and getting into playing your way towards the NBA 2K League, like how different was it getting to 2K League this year compared to past 2K leagues where all you had to do is just basically grind your way towards winning like a lot more than half of the amount of games you play in order to get in, because there's so much scouting, there's so much, pretty much the same way you would do if you were playing in a real life basketball league.
Yeah, I think every year the tryout process gets more robust, right, for the NBA 2K League, and gets more, like you said, legitimized to the point that it's almost similar. There are similar aspects to the NBA itself, allowing, I think that the league has tried to get to a point where you can get to a specific sample size that, okay, here are guys who are really legitimately have a chance, to the point where it's a small enough number that scouts can actually watch and they can actually study. Because when you have, when you narrow it down to the combine, you have a couple thousand people, it's impossible for those scouts to see everyone. Right. So they're relying at that point on the numbers coming in, the analytics, plus what they're actually going to go out, what they hear people saying, what they actually see on online streams, as opposed to just that combine process. So now you're at a point where hopefully the combine itself, the tryout process, has a small enough number when it gets to that point that they can watch and actually understand how those top players line up against each other.
And not to mention the fact that those players have a chance to work their way towards playing for the defending champions of the last NBA 2K League tournaments that we just saw.
Yeah, Wizards District Gaming beating the Warriors this year in the final. A wild remote season, but you definitely saw a lot of players. I think that, a lot of guys faced with that adversity of playing, some of them in separate rooms, separate apartments, playing online, playing over servers. And it was you saw there was a mental aspect to things to be able to withstand what a lot of guys did not expect. And a lot of guys showed up in their markets, in their team cities, and basically were in quarantine for 6 months playing video games. So really interesting season that they had over the summer.
Yeah. And speaking of, congratulations on being able to take part in the ESPN2 telecast of the NBA 2K League. That's a first time ever that has actually happened, especially when you're in the middle of quarantine. Like when I turn on the game, it's like I'm actually watching live NBA basketball, but from a video game standpoint. Like, what went through your mind when you found out that not just a portion, but the entire season was being done remotely compared to past years?
Yeah, I mean, it was. So you're talking about the ESPN broadcast, what was different?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was, a different audience. We had so many people coming in and saying, especially, I would love to search on Twitter each night, NBA 2K League, ESPN, just to see what people were saying. And it was like, wait, what is this? What's going on? And I think for a lot of people, a lot of, especially middle-aged people who are like, why is there ever video games on my TV? There were no sports on at the time, right? So that was the closest thing that people had to traditional sports. And I think a lot of people gave it a chance and said, hey, I get it. It's basketball. I know what's going on. I know what the objective is. I know the teams. I know the colors. And, it's cool. It's something different. And these guys who are playing, who are going through this, are just normal looking people. They're not 7-footers. They can't bench press 300 pounds. They're different. They're like me. And I think a lot of people were inspired to watch that. And then from the broadcast standpoint, is different. Not having the players. I'm used to being like, hey, interviewing a guy or talking to a guy right before the game, right? And then in the broadcast, you can say, hey, I was talking to so-and-so. He said they're going to try to do this, this, and this. We didn't have that. So it was a lot of, and you're not next to the guy that you're calling it with. So you can't have a conversation in person, during a commercial break or anything like that. So it was definitely some new challenges that were brought up with remote gameplay.
And not to mention the best 2 out of 3, just to get one victory during the regular season. It's just so different. Like, imagine if it was like that with the NBA. That's not even the question to ask. Well, the best 2 out of 3 does fit with the esports world.
It definitely does. And because a lot of times, right, you play with your friend and you say, what do you say? Especially after you lose that first game, you say 2 out of 3, right? And so I think that, take baseball, for example, right? They had the rule with the runner on second base during the extra innings this year to try to speed things up because of, they didn't want to use pitchers in this short season and stuff like that. They had the 7 innings doubleheader and certain things I think that baseball tried. DH in the National League, a lot of people are like, maybe this should be what it is going forward. And I think that in esports and the NBA 2K League trying some things out, I think there's some people that are like, maybe things should be 2 out of 3. And I think that there's potentially long-term goals. By the way, you're going to see, we have no idea what's going to happen in the NBA yet, but there's been a lot of talk that you're going to have more like series, right? Like baseball does, because they don't want teams traveling. So maybe the Knicks are going to play all 4 games that they're playing in one season against the Celtics. They're going to play 4 straight. They're going to play at a neutral site or something like that. And so it's not the same because those games are each going to count as one regular season game. But, it kind of mirrors what's going to happen in the NBA a little bit.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that, well, since we're getting to talk about the NBA, what are your impressions about the upcoming 72-game season format, the way it's structured between the 7 and 10 seeds, having playing tournaments to the 72-game format where you're potentially going to have reduction of traveling and starting on Christmas Day to save a lot of revenue?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people would be naive to think that we're going to have full arenas this year. I think that we're not looking at full arenas and stadiums until maybe the end of 2021 at the earliest, especially considering that NBA and NHL arenas are inside. But I think that, I think the NBA is trying to figure out how can they make the most of it? And, from the reason that you have like baseball, again, to bring up baseball has 162 games. The reason people don't want to shorten it, even though they feel like logistically it should be shortened, is records, right? It is the sanctity of baseball records because a lot of them are numerical. Same thing with football. You go from 16 to 18 games, like people are saying, well, then how do you compare a record from 15 years ago? The NBA doesn't have that issue because so many of the records are based on averages, right? And 72 versus 82, guy averages 29 points per game in a 72 or an 82 game season. What's really the difference, right? But I think that, I think it's going to be different from a fan aspect. I think people, I hope people enjoyed the bubble because we're basically going to get something similar to the bubble, I think, is, what we're going to look at in chunks this NBA season. And I'm sure there's hope that by the playoffs or something, we can get more, fans into arenas. But I just think that you'd be a little naive to believe that. And I think that what you're going to see from the NBA, the NHL, I use the NBA and NHL because, right, they're going to have to come back. Like MLB doesn't have to come back until March. They set their pace. They ended at the right time so they can play a full outdoor season next year. We see the NFL going right now, but the NBA and NHL have to figure out, what they're going to do in how to find new forms of revenue streams. And maybe that's different forms of content. Maybe that's different ways you can pay to be a VIP and, watch from the sideline, like was free during the bubble or something. They're going to have to come up with these ways to basically make money. And it's not just so the owners make money. It's, you need to pay the players, right? And so much of that money came from ticket sales. So the NBA is going to have to figure out, how to maintain enough revenue to pay those players with 10 less games on TV and 70 and 82 less games likely for each team not having ticket sales plus playoffs.
Yeah, of course, it's also a negative effect on the teams that actually went as far as the conference finals and the finals. It's going to be too soon for those teams. But let me ask you one question. Before the 72-game season actually got confirmed, like, would you have taken this or a 60-game season going all the way up until August, even if it means playing back to the Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, remember, the reason the players deep down wanted a 52-game season starting around MLK Day weekend. The problem is you're going to lose millions, if not billions of dollars from the salary cap. So the players, it's basically, what I heard was, if you're making $8 million a year, you got to say, you got to take 5.5 million. Now that might not sound like, 5.5 million is not that bad, but in the grand scheme of that guy might have put down a mortgage on a house that he thought he was going to be making $8 million a year for 3 years. He loses that. He's got to pay his agent. He's got to pay all these players. And so a lot of those guys, not the superstars, but a lot of those guys, more role players said, I got to make my money now while I have, my 5-year NBA prime. But you're the other part of your question there. Oh, the 60. I think that maybe it would have been more enjoyable from a fan perspective to have some, take some time to regroup and not have these guys, like you said, the Lakers being trotted out there, 2 months after training camp really starting, about a month after they won their title. If you want to go, if I'm assuming that these teams are going to have to regroup in November, you also have teams like the New York Knicks who haven't played a game since March. Right. So they've been over rested. I think that you can compensate that by maybe not loading up the Lakers schedule early. I think that'd be the right thing for the NBA to do if there's a way to kind of manually backload that schedule. But, I think that there's a lot to be said for the NBA sticking to its schedule as much as possible. You mentioned going into August, going into the Olympics. I think there's been so much criticism about the NBA and that they didn't have the numbers for the finals. It wasn't good that the NBA finals went into football season. That's a fact. And I think that the NBA definitely learned that people are just used to watching the NBA in June, the NBA finals. And I think if you can get that schedule back close to where it should be, I think that'll be more successful.
Yeah, I mean, from a fan perspective, it was kind of exciting to watch the NBA being played in a bubble environment with the playoff contenders and the playoff teams being played all throughout the summer. But I get it. For the sake of revenue and the tradition of the NBA, you want to try to get back to the way it used to be before the global pandemic is possible. Not to mention the fact that you have to choose between watching that and the WNBA finals that we just watched. Like, which bubble impressed you the most between the NBA and the WNBA?
Well, I think that the ability that the team still played hard, I think there was so much concern. Our team's going to actually, play hard. And if anything, I thought that the bubble kind of went back to your basics, right? No crowd. It's you man on man, like, what you're not going to get to hype up the crowd, but you get to, you go LeBron, you go one-on-one and Jimmy Butler, you get that glory. You get that feeling of why did we start playing basketball in the first place? And everyone enjoys good bragging rights, over, it's like guys playing pickup in the gym as hard as possible at the highest level. So, same thing you mentioned, the WNBA, the Seattle Storm. I think that, there's a lot to be said for how strong of a team they were. And if there were teams that didn't go 100% because they didn't feel like the bubble was, right. And then they shouldn't have won. To me, they got exposed because maybe they weren't the best team. This was pure basketball, no home court advantage, no sort of those small, tiny advantages of even sleeping in your bed. It's like basketball summer camp. You show up, you work hard, and, survival of the fittest almost. And that's what we saw, especially from the Lakers in the bubble.
And we also saw that for the Miami Heat, proving
that's true.
A better team than all the other seeds that didn't make it to the finals to go up against LeBron coming out of the Eastern Conference. You saw a lot of that. And so the teams that didn't get invited to the bubble, the New York Knicks, the Atlanta Hawks, how are they going to respond in the 72-game season when it comes back?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously those teams are rested. You saw a lot of teams, the Hawks, for example, they have their core, right? They know what they're going with Trae Young, John Collins, Kevin Huerter, a couple of those guys in Atlanta. The Knicks are a little different because we're going to have free agency, which is going to be wild, right? For basically like a month or two. We've never had this short of NBA free agency where guys get signed and it's like, all right, you're coming to training camp with us next week, find an apartment, get ready to go. And I think the Knicks are a little bit different because we'll see how much of that team is actually the same players that are actually playing. So a team like the Knicks is going to is probably what the roster looks like oh my God, it's November 9th, in a month. Right on December 22nd is going to look, that starting lineup's going to look a lot different than we think it is right now. The Hawks we could probably predict what the Hawks is going to look like. So it's a matter of teams are really not going to have that sort of practice time that you're used to. But it's something that's going to happen. And you wonder if some of those free agents say, you know what, weird season, don't really know what's going on. I'm not going to get my money right now, right? Because the contracts are probably going to be less that are handed out this free agency season than you would expect. There might be some guys that say, I'll take a 1-year deal to play with the Lakers. I'll take a 1-year deal to play with the Heat. I'll take a 1-year deal to just try to win a championship and worry about my money after this season. So that could be a huge factor in the way that things go.
Yeah, and depending on who the Knicks start off the season against, who they start the season against, the Knicks might be able to get out to a good start. It's just a matter of how they're going to take advantage of it, since you're going to be possibly playing against the teams that were in the bubble.
Well, I think it's a matter also if the Knicks, there's so many rumors going around. The Knicks might say, look, we think we can get Chris Paul and somehow get another big time player too. And we think the Eastern Conference is weak enough that we can go after it. And that sounds crazy, but it's not really crazy when you think about that the Heat won the Eastern Conference, right? In these short bursts of seasons, I think there are some people that think Chris Paul has enough in him that if he gets one other big time player, that, they're going to try to make something happen in the Eastern Conference. I'm not saying I would do it. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that's why I say we don't know what to predict with the New York Knicks in a month.
Yeah, not so much. Yeah, we really don't know, especially since you're going to be playing in a Madison Square Garden, possibly empty, or like the way that you would have had to play if you was a playoff contender in the NBA bubble that we just saw last year. There's going to be a lot of teams that still can't allow their fans in. And there's going to be some teams that have limited fans. It's going to be pretty much like how with the NFL started off their season. Some states have limited fans. Some states did not have any fans at all. But yeah, it's going to be very different when we get to the upcoming NBA season. No lie.
That's for sure.
But let's talk about some NFL. All right, God, what first half did we saw? Like, what are your favorite moments of the first half of the NFL season?
The NFL season, I think that it's been impressive that they've been able to get through, right? 9 weeks now. There's definitely been some COVID situations that have gone on. You see now they're basically playing regardless of what goes on. If you're potential for COVID, you just get off, make sure you're away, and they're still playing games and trying not to delay them. I mean, look, I think, I think that the NFL's working as hard as possible as to try to make things as legitimate as possible, as functional as possible. You're seeing some fans, you're seeing some not, but I think, look, the teams that are playing well for the most part are players you think would play well, teams that you think would play well. And what the NFL also has, which the NBA doesn't have, is that built-in TV model of, when the games are, right? You just got to worry about Sunday. And I think that the NFL, like I said, the NBA kind of lost their, what season are they in? The NFL Sunday, is football. I mean, that's what you're still sitting watching football on Sunday afternoon, just like you would have. And fantasy and betting is driving a lot of what's going on in the sports world, especially in the NFL.
Yeah, but since we pretty much got the structure out, like, how bad the New York Jets?
The Jets are really bad. And, you could argue a little bit of that. A couple of guys sat out this year. But at the same time, the matter, like getting rid of Jamal Adams, getting rid of Le'Veon Bell. What was the point of bringing these guys in, whether it was draft or free agency, these superstars, to get next to nothing out of them? And, you can't, it never works well. And the Giants have the same problem, a lot of problems too, where it never works well when the players are saying, basically demanding trades, and you're getting nothing out of them. Like, there's got to be a line somewhere. If you're going to trade those players, that's fine, but you got to get something. Like, the fact that the Jets couldn't trade Le'Veon Bell is nuts to me. No one. You can even get a 6th-round pick for him. Just take something. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And, no one wanted to pay his contract. And I think that's where it starts with the Jets. And now you're 0-8. You have to play the Patriots tonight. We're talking on Monday. You have to figure out something to build on, something where we can say, hey, even if you go 2-6 the rest of the year, all right, Sam Darnold figured this out. He's got a great rapport with this wide receiver. This guy on defense is going to be our shutdown corner. You got to find something. And the Jets just can't even seem to find any bright spots.
Yeah, but assuming that they go 0-16 like the Cleveland Browns did a few seasons ago and the Detroit Lions did in 2008, and they're in position to draft Trevor Lawrence, like, what would you start? What would be your starting quarterback?
If
They were to draft Trevor Lawrence, would you pick him as starting quarterback?
I mean, yeah, over Sam Darnold, you have to see. Obviously, you have to line the guys up and see. I mean, we see from first overall picks, right? Jameis Winston was a Heisman Trophy winner, won a championship at Florida State. He started off and on for 5 years, and now he's sitting on the sidelines. You know, we'll see. Are Jared Goff and Carson Wentz really guys? Marcus Mariota, who went second to Jameis Winston, right? He's off. He's not. He's backing up Derek Carr right now with the Raiders. So no, it's not always a given. You know, so it's not something you also have to rush. You can figure out who the guy is, trade the other guy, figure that out. I don't think Sam Darnold is a bad quarterback. I'm not saying he's, you know, an MVP level type of talent, but that there's a lot of other problems with the Jets. I don't look at the Jets and say quarterback is the issue. You still have to draft Trevor Lawrence if you have the number one pick because he's the best player out there. You still have to see how he does in a training camp and how he does against NFL competition. But I mean, it's not the quarterback that really starts with the problem. Why do the Jets have like 36, 37-year-old Frank Gore, however old he is, as their starting running back? You're trying to build on something. You're trying to find, and your running back is one of the oldest players in the entire, outside of kickers, in the entire football league. That's a problem. So there are other places that you have to start. But you still take Trevor Lawrence number one.
Yeah, not to mention, but if you were the general manager for the New York Jets and the season is today, like, what position would you try to improve more after what we saw this season?
Man. You know, we get caught up in skill positions, right? I say you're taking Trevor Lawrence at number one because he's the best player available in the draft, and you have to do that. But after that, you got to find, I don't think the defense is terrible. You know, we saw it against the Bills. They were able to keep the Bills out of the end zone. They weren't even that bad against the Chiefs. I think you got to start on the line. That's where you got to build around in the NFL. The Indianapolis Colts have done it the best. You know, that's why the Colts are competitive this season. People are saying, well, Phillip Rivers looks like a corpse out there. They can't figure out exactly what running back is the guy. Their wide receivers are hurt, but they block. I mean, that's, you know, so I think the Jets need to start somewhere around there. And on both sides of the ball, probably on the line, to build, to get somewhere with this football team.
Yeah, the Jets definitely have a lot of rebuilding and development to do going forward. But sticking with the New York Giants, even though they are bad, they did just pick up their second win of the season. Ironically, both wins came against the Washington Redskins, football team, whatever you want to call them this season going forward until they come with it.
Hey, the football team hasn't lost to the Giants yet, right?
Nope. Well, they've lost to the Giants twice.
Oh, sorry. They haven't beat the Giants in the history of the football team, right, this year.
Nope, not this year. But sticking with the New York Giants, they have a chance to actually make the playoffs. Do you see it happening?
Here's the thing. I don't see it happening because they're 2-7 and they lost that game against the Eagles. Their schedule is still pretty tough. So, you know, it's not exactly a given, but if the Giants won that game against the Eagles, right? If Evan Ingram catches that pass in Philadelphia, or the Giants almost beat the Cowboys, right? The Giants were right there at the end. I know they had a chance against the Bucks. If they win 2 or 3 of those games, all of a sudden, you know, are we talking about a 4-5 Giants team? The Giants, you can convince me. See, the argument here is you can convince me that the Giants are the best team in the NFC East. But I still would tell you they're probably not going to win the division because of, like what I just said, they're 2-7. They're losing that tiebreaker against the Eagles. They're losing that tiebreaker against the Cowboys. And the schedule isn't easy. You know, I'm looking at it right now. Yes, they have the Eagles, who obviously they've played well before. They get a bye, and then they get the Bengals, who have been off and on. But then they have the Seahawks, Cardinals, Browns, Ravens before the Cowboys. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to tell me that they're going to win one of those games against the Seahawks, Cardinals, Browns, and Ravens. So that's the problem. I don't think the team is the problem, because the team, if they played well enough, could have convinced me, could have stolen a few games and gotten to 7-9. They almost beat the Bears early in the season, but it just unfortunately is a fact that they're 2-7 right now.
Yeah, and the funny thing about the Giants' losses is, minus the blowout losses to the San Francisco 49ers, all the losses came in like just a single possession. Like look at the game against the Rams. They were there just a single touchdown away from forcing overtime interception. They were like, and then look at the game last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, not yesterday, but the week before. They were just a 2-point conversion away from forcing overtime. And then they had a late second loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. They had a chance to redeem themselves, interception. There's so much that you can pick from Donald Jones. Like the way the Giants are being competitive, like how impressed are you with the competitiveness of the New York Giants despite the record results?
I think I said it when they lost that game to the Cowboys. I was like, you can't compare the 0-5 Jets to the 0-5 Giants, right? Has there ever been a bigger difference at the time between 0-5 teams? We just talked about the Jets. The Giants have a lot to improve on, but still less than the Jets. You know, this team, I know people want to throw Daniel Jones under the bus and everything. He's not, he's fine. You know, he's not same thing as Eli Manning. He's not an MVP caliber talent, but he is a starting quarterback in this league. And he has to replace, he has to, correct a lot of his issues. I feel like he gets in close games. He tries to force the issue. I think what Eli developed, right, was we complained about it, but he knew when to throw the ball away or take a sack, and he didn't do it gracefully. But I don't think that shows up in the box score, how many turnovers you salvage and how many games you salvage. That's why people called Eli a great game manager. He wasn't trying to force the issue like that. So that's one place. Obviously, Saquon Barkley's hurt. They got Andrew Thomas to start building around the offensive line this year. And I think you could improve some defensive play. I was ready to come on here when I was talking before about, the Giants need to get something out of those trades. That Odell Beckham Jr. trade for a while didn't look great, but Jabril Peppers has looked solid this year. You got to really kind of like a guy that can be in the top half of your defense in this league. So they still need to build around the defense a little bit more. I don't know if Evan Ingram is going to be there long-term. I think you still need one more playmaker on offense at either tight end or wide receiver. I don't think Ingram's been the guy that they expected. Shepard's hasn't been quite the guy they expected. Golden Tate isn't what he once was. Darius Slayton's a great wide receiver. He shouldn't be your number one wide receiver. He'd be a great number two wide receiver. So I still think, the Giants can make a few moves in that sort of way in the next couple of years, but they're trending in the right direction, which the Jets are not.
Yeah, and the only reason why they managed to pick up the wins that they've had this season against the Washington football team, it's only because the defense came through when it actually mattered. Like in the first one of the season, they managed to stop a potential 2-point conversion that would have costed the game. Or in the last game, where every time that the Washington football team had a chance to turn things around after being down by just a single field goal, they had interceptions pick them off. You think at this point you'd be rooting for them to lose for trying to trap Trevor Lawrence, but that's going to be some controversy. But assuming that the Giants get to that point where they had to worry about being worse enough for a top pick or a top 2 pick and drafting Trevor Lawrence, would you draft him or would you draft a position that's much neatly improved going into the next season?
Like I said, if you have the first pick, which the Giants aren't going to have because they have 2 wins already, you take Trevor Lawrence. But if you have any other pick, if you're the Giants, I really think you have to obviously you're looking at what's the best player available is, but I would love to see, a defensive lineman or a linebacker or even a defensive back who really jumps out. But I think you've got to go back to what that Giants smash mouth defense football. You just mentioned that the defense is playing well. I think that the secondary has been really good. I think that the linebacking needs to improve a little bit. And I think that that's where you can really start with this team and kind of head, like we said, in the right direction. You got an offensive lineman in last year's draft. You can do it again. If there's a crazy good, wide receiver, get him. But I think that's more of a 2nd-round pick for the Giants this year or a tight end. But I think that the linebacking crew is where they really need help.
Yeah, the linebacker crew has suffered a lot, especially since they have not been able to stop teams from getting down the field, which I feel like that's the main problem for all the Giants losses they've had this season.
Yeah, it's been, but you mentioned the defense has been playing much better as of late. I think that 49ers game did expose some of that linebacking. You brought in a guy like Blake Martinez this year, and people were really excited about him, but he's not a superstar. He's a starter, which was almost a progress with the Giants in the linebacking core, but I think that you need something a little bit more. You need someone, like you said, commanding the defense, being able to especially defend against the run for the Giants. And then you can start to, really look forward with things. Those are those positions. You got to get guys. The Giants, a lot of people criticize the Giants, right? They didn't take Josh Allen, not the quarterback, the linebacker a couple of years ago, or the defensive player. And that really hurt them in terms of, could they have gotten Daniel Jones at 17? Could they have been able to get a little bit more out of that draft? With a guy like Josh Allen and Daniel Jones, that could have been really impressive, but I think they just didn't think he was going to be around late. So that's why they made that pick.
Yeah. But getting back to the Giants playoff chances, they're still just slightly in it. If they could defeat if they could beat the Philadelphia Eagles this Sunday, would that be the turning point for the Giants season?
Well, all of a sudden, then they're a half game out, right, of the playoffs. But I still think that you've got to get to 8 wins to win the division. And that would mean that the Giants could only lose 1 game the rest of the year. And that means that they would have to go 3-1 against the Seahawks, Cardinals, Browns, and Ravens. I mean, that's that.
Saying that those teams are not beatable because we just saw the Seahawks get destroyed by the Buffalo Bills.
Look, I'm not saying that those 4 teams are all going to win the Super Bowl, but 3 of those 4, take the Browns out of it, are legitimate Super Bowl, are teams that could. I mean, the Seahawks and Ravens have been near the top of their conferences the entire year, and the Cardinals beat the Seahawks. So it's just going to be tough. But I'm not saying it can't be done. But I think that the Giants' problem with making the playoffs is more that they put themselves in a hole early versus the actual skill level of the team right now.
And that's something that both New York teams are struggling throughout the season. They get themselves to these early holes, and they have a tough time getting out of it.
That's true. The Giants, I mean, it seems like every year they dig themselves a hole early.
Yeah. But let's get to the most impressive division. What are the most impressive division leading teams up until this point?
I mean, I think that the NFL is a little more open than we've seen in past years. I think the Chiefs, defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs, it's still probably their title to defend. The Ravens have looked a little shaky. I'm not 100% sold on the Steelers, and we saw it. They almost lost to the Cowboys this week. They find themselves in a lot of close games. They don't have that explosion. They need to keep games low scoring, and we're not going to see them play the Chiefs this year. They're not on each other's schedule, but I feel like a team like the Chiefs could run it up on the Steelers. On the NFC side, it's interesting. I'm not out on the Seahawks, even though they lost to the Bills. I still think, and they have Jamal Adams, by the way, back, and they're getting some help on defense. I think they're the most complete team in the NFC. I think the Packers have shown in the playoffs, and I think the Packers got to the NFC Championship game last year. A healthy Packers team is still very scary on offense. Those, the Seahawks and Packers both need help on defense. The Saints have been good, but I just feel like they're a little bit past the peak of that team. The last couple of years, right? They lost that miracle play to the Vikings 2 years ago. They lost on that was 3 years ago now. They lost on that play. They lost to the Rams on a questionable call. They were last year, they lost, I think, to the Vikings in the first round. They're always around, but I think they're like a little past that prime of that team.
Yeah, I mean, after watching the game yesterday against Tom Brady's Buccaneers, you still feel the same way you felt before?
I think the Buccaneers, look, and we saw them play the Giants the week before. They've got some problems that they need to fix. And I think their defense isn't as great as people make them out to be. And that offense, when you get pressure on Brady, he looks like a 43-year-old quarterback out there, right? I went from watching Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa yesterday, who are both flying around the field, 20-some young 20s guys. And then you see Brady, and he's stuck in the mud in Tampa Bay. So they've got to figure out a lot of things. They got to protect him. They got to establish the run. which Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette did not do last night, when they can establish the run and then you've got Brady slinging it out to 3 top receivers, that can make them dangerous. I'm not out on them. I think that, yeah, it was a blowout, but the game started slipping early. The Saints had a great game plan for them. That might be a bad matchup for the Bucs, but they still have the talent there to make things happen.
Yeah, you got a point. But get back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. You mentioned that they might not be able to contain their 8-0 record for so long. Like, how many more games do you think before the Pittsburgh Steelers finally lose one?
So they have, I think that the Ravens do get to them in that rematch in Pittsburgh on Thanksgiving night. The Steelers do have they have a pretty easy schedule still to go. Really, they have games against the Ravens, Bills, and Colts and Browns. Those are going to be the tough games. But Bengals, Jaguars, Washington, and they have the Bengals twice. So those are, those 4 they should take care of. I think the bigger question is, can Ben Roethlisberger stay healthy? And I think that's what you're really going to have to follow throughout the season.
Yeah, that's exactly true. But getting into a little bit of another topic, like, a month ago, you managed to have some involvement with the #sports award, #sports event. What is that experience like for you? Being able to interview Trevor Brewer and a bunch of other guys.
Yeah, Trevor Bauer and some of the people, Zach Leonsis, Nicole LaPointe Jameson, and Ariel Powers from the Washington Mystics. It's always just interesting there's nothing like interviewing smart people. Unfortunately, that's not what you get today, right? You get me. But, the interviewing smart people is always fun because as a moderator, I mean, you learn something as you're talking to these people. Trevor Bauer is such an interesting guy in terms of how he wants to change how people look at baseball players, right? There's kind of baseball code, right? You show up, you work hard, you do. He's like, we got to engage with the fans because in this new digital media, social media age, if you're not engaging with the fans, you're going to get left behind. You can't big time the fans and be like, I'm not doing this extra media or signing autographs. You really got to connect with them. And so it was really interesting learning that from him.
Mm-hmm. And what went through your mind when you found out that you have a chance to interview these people at the #sports events?
I mean, I feel lucky, I feel like I just get to have there's in everything in life, right? We want to get excited about it. I've heard recently, you want to wake up and say, I get to do this, not I have to do this. And it was, I get to have an enlightening conversation with really smart people who are going to bring up topics and teach me some things while teaching the audience some things. I mean, to me, that's why I'm in this business, right? To be curious, to ask questions, to find things out, to communicate. So I love it.
Yeah. But at interviewing Ariel Powers, who's not only a WNBA champion, but a gaming ambassador, like, what are your impressions about the way that she progressed, not only as a WNBA player, but as a dedicated video gamer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing with Ariel that's really cool is I don't think that she said to herself, it wasn't like she went out with this big agency team at the beginning of COVID and said, I have an opportunity here to be a big gamer. She just likes gaming. She was like, hey, could I play with people? Like, what can I do? And I think that genuine side has come through to a lot of people, that she just enjoys it. It's natural for her. She was stuck at home while she couldn't play basketball at the beginning of this pandemic and started playing. And people saw that and invested in her, both in NBA 2K and in other games, Call of Duty and other forms of video games. So, she's such an impressive person that she now also sees the responsibility that she has there to get more people into it, to spread. She just had an all-female gaming tournament, all women gamers for NBA 2K sponsor. She got a sponsor like Starburst to jump in with her and really showed made progress and showed people what that talent that's out there for women NBA 2K players. So, it's not just a lot of times when you go into these boardrooms, right, with athletes, they say, hey, do you like video games? Okay, we're going to get you with this streaming situation. We're going to set you up with this brand. But for her, it was just, I want to do this. And I think that comes through.
Yeah. And I know it was a privilege being able to interview her along with many other special guests that you had during #sports. Like, you have a lot in common. you like video gaming, you like fan engagement, and you also like sports.
Yeah. So the other people on the panel with Ariel were Zach Leonsis, who runs gaming partnership. Basically, he's a VP. He's a VP at Monumental Sports and Entertainment, who own the Wizards, Mystics, Capitals, Team Liquid, and then Nicole LaPointe Jameson, who is the CEO of Evil Genius's gaming team. And the whole point of this was that we were people that have done stuff other than gaming, whether it be sports, entertainment, business, and got into video games as well. So yeah, it was really awesome to be around people, because I think, to me, the gaming world needs to also recognize that not everyone has to be a hardcore gamer to be accepted into the gaming world. I equate it to, if the NBA said, if NBA organizations, NBA media, NBA players said, wait, you didn't play competitive AAU and like try to become an NBA player, you can't watch our games. You're not part of us. The NBA would not be what it is. They wouldn't make any money. It wouldn't be watched. It wouldn't be as big as it is. So you have to be more willing. I think the gaming community, I always say, needs to be willing to say, hey, you're a moderate gamer, you're a beginner gamer, you're someone who just likes gaming as a moderate hobby. We accept you. It shouldn't just be like, you don't play 12 hours a day, like you don't get it. And I think that the gaming world needs to focus on that.
Yeah. Fan engagement is everything. And I had a chance to take part in Hashtag Sports and talk to some people from there. And you really learn a lot from other individuals that are in the sports broadcasting field and other sports related media fields. And it's just so much that you can take in when you get involved in events like that.
100%. I encourage everyone out there to network as much as possible, to meet people. And what I always say about networking is not everyone you talk to is going to help you. Just because you talk to someone, you put yourself out there and you get to know them and you have a conversation, or you reach out via email and it turns out it's not someone who can really help you. You got to do that 10 times to find that one person that will help you. So you got to get out there. And like you said, trust the process, enjoy the process. So what? Maybe you get to know someone that you wouldn't have gotten to know. You connect with them on LinkedIn or on other forms of social media. You have a new connection in the world. Who knows where that goes? You can't get to that point unless you try. So that's what I encourage people to do.
Yeah. And with making these connections, you're either going to connect with somebody who's already in the field and that might help you a lot, or at the very least, you're going to have like a good friend and going forward, or it's even people just like me, for instance, that are actually trying to get in the next step in the world of sports.
100%. What you're doing is awesome out here, meeting as many people as possible and putting yourself out there. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love to do what you're doing, but they're like, could I do it? I don't know. And look, we're talking on Zoom here, right? You were taping on video with your laptop and a camera last time, and you're learning and you're developing. So you get it.
Yeah. I had to change it up. I mean, you can't stick to the same style of recording forever, especially because being involved with Zoom is one of the reasons why I got to interview a lot of players for the New York Liberty, the Aces, the Connecticut Sun, the Storm. It's just amazing how you could make the same type of development that you would have had to do if you was in the real world right now. You're basically in the real world by putting together your own craft.
Mm-hmm. And you're taking advantage also of, look, we're in a pandemic right now, unfortunately, but there are ways to pick on things and develop yourself and progress. So at the end of this pandemic, you can come out on the other side, further along than you were.
Yeah. So what are your future plans for the rest of 2020 and 2021?
Oh man, I wish I could say that I think more than like a few minutes ahead. I'm interviewing. I'm hosting right now Hall of Trivia on HQ, which is a football and fantasy trivia show on the HQ app. If you remember HQ, some people left, some people have stayed with it. Scott Rogowski, remember the host back in the day. HQ Trivia, Hall of Trivia on HQ. I host it live, 8 p.m. Eastern time, every Thursday night right now for the fall. And then we'll see what happens after that. I'd love to get involved in more with football, basketball, golf, esports. And I've got some things hopefully brewing in the start of 2021.
Yeah. And I also got some things coming up too, as in the next couple episodes, I'm going to be talking about, of course, the build up to the return of the NBA, the return of college basketball. It's just a lot of stuff going on. That concludes this episode of Nothing But That Sports Talk. Thank you for stopping by, Jeffrey. I really appreciate your time. And next year, 2K League is going to be bigger than ever, rather than doing it remote like we did last year, or we're finally going to get back to doing it the way it was supposed to be done before this whole pandemic became an issue.
We will see. Yeah, hopefully sooner rather than later. Hopefully I'll see you in that NBA 2K League studio soon.
And to all the big balls out there, were you ahead of the game